Hi, Brian White is filling in for Buck Levasseur. Tonight we'll talk with a couple who've left the stress of big business behind, followed their passion, and found out there's more than one way to make money with a chainsaw in the Upper Peninsula. But first, the DNR has been remapping deer wintering yards. We'll tag along to find out what's involved. So sit back, put your feet up, come on along. It's Monday night and time for discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill, the eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
We've all heard of birds migrating south for the winter. Actually, my mother-in-law and father-in-law do the same. Like many people, they head for warmer climates, someplace where life is a bit easier during the long winter months. People pretty much do this for comfort. Animals like deer engage in this annual ritual for survival. Somewhere about mid-December, deer throughout the Upper Peninsula begin their annual migration, like people, to areas where life is a bit easier. These areas, known as deer wintering complexes or deer yards, feature special characteristics such as cedar, hemlock, and low snow conditions. Improper management of these vital wintering areas could have negative consequences affecting the overall deer herd. In an effort to ensure wildlife biologists and foresters have the best available information when making decisions about conservation and sustainable management of these areas, the Department of Natural Resources is currently in the process of updating their maps. I spent some time with DNR wildlife biologists Bob Depker and Steve Carson to find out what's involved.
Deer, because they live in a very stressful environment in the winter, have evolved and adapted to their environment by seeking out conifer cover to use as shelter to moderate the impact of the winter. Because of the stressful environment, they have to adapt to winter conditions. So deer are great energy conservationists. They have evolved behavior and physiologically to endure winter when their foodstuffs are reduced from spring, summer, and fall. They're eating poor quality food. Metabolically, deer gear down, so they don't require as much food. Behaviorally, they seek out these deer wintering complexes where they can minimize heat loss and thus conserve energy. And in fact, deer learn the wintering location from their mother. It's a learned behavior, so fawns learn these locations of where to move in late fall or early winter to spend the winter. They also walk in single file to conserve energy. Rather than randomly dispersed across the landscape, they actually follow single file, so it costs deer less to travel from shelter to feeding areas. The most important trees for shelter for deer and for food are cedar and hemlock. Cedar is probably the best food for deer, as it's the only food that deer can live on exclusively. Any other species, it's a mix, but cedar provides everything that they need. And hemlock, though it isn't a preferred food, it is eaten by deer, but it has superb shelter quality compared to any other conifer species, including cedar. These wintering areas are much more important the further north you go in the peninsula. So the areas up in the Lake Superior watershed are very precise in the shelter requirements and food that deer require, because it's a much more stressful environment than the more southern latitudes, say in Menominee County. Well, this year a major task of the department is to identify and map deer wintering complexes.
And deer bedded below us all through here.
And it's not a new process. We've actually located information going back to the mid-1920s on department personnel actually mapping deer wintering areas in the Upper Peninsula.
The department's been mapping these complexes since the 1920s. So our approach was to go back and accumulate as much of that historic mapping information that we could get to use that as a basis moving forward. The oldest we have that we're able to get on a map. They've mapped them previous, but the oldest we could get back is 51 here. You'll see when we toggle from the 51 map through to the 2000s, you'll notice the polygons in the northern part of the peninsula, they get thinner, and the polygons in the south end get thicker. What was happening is the deer were progressively over the decades moving from north to south as a lot of the shelter in those complexes was disappearing. So there was just a gradual shift. So we took two approaches there with that data. One, we took that data and mapped it out and took that information into the field to the foresters and the biologists to actually have them draw on top of those maps where to indicate where the deer are wintering today, using the old data as a reference. The second approach we took was we actually modeled the landscape in the UP to try to predict where, based on where we know deer are at in winter, model the surface and try to predict where we may have missed. So basically, where do we think deer are wintering, and compare that to where the biologists and foresters said there were deer wintering. And then that's part of that verification process this winter, is we're not only going to look at where we drew polygons where we think they are, but we're going to go back to where we model and say, well, they also might be located here. Did we miss some spots? So the part of that verification is both of those approaches.
We have a couple different ways that we can use to verify if deer are using an area, but we can check them on the ground and actually observe the deer or look for signs like browsing or tracks or trails. Also, an aerial survey can be used where we can actually look for tracks on the ground. We're flying low enough that we can actually observe the deer or sign of deer in these areas that we're flying over. So our efforts today, like flying, would help us verify the use of these areas by deer.
Look at this complex here.
Yeah, when you get up, you can really see it, the landscape patterns and why deer spend the winter here. You can see that cedar or lowland conifers represents about 50% of the landscape, and the other 50% is aspen or northern hardwoods, as you can see from the air. And that's what we found in our investigation, is that when about 50% of the area is in shelter, or either cedar or hemlock, and 50% in deciduous dominated or hardwood forests like aspen or northern hardwoods, that's the best wintering conditions for deer. During the winter, deer do not want to travel any further than they have to obtain food. Deer can lose up to 25 to 30% of their body fat before they succumb to winter conditions. But if we can reduce the amount of travel that they have to do through deep snow, they can conserve energy. So we try to set up sails immediately adjacent to the edge of the shelter, so deer don't have to expend as much energy to travel between where they obtain food and where they have shelter. Other things that we try to do is there's a lot of whole tree harvesting now, which doesn't leave tops on the site for deer. So within deer wintering complexes, we can write into timber sales to leave the tops on the ground and available for deer during the winter. Well, back in the mid-'80s through about 2007, we tagged over 2,600 deer, that meaning that we captured them in the winter and marked them with ear tags. And much of this work was done by volunteers, primarily UP whitetails, and they just did a tremendous job of keeping interest over a 20-year period. And like I said, about 2,600 animals were tagged, and we received tagging reports on about 40% of those, are over 1,000 animals. And as you can see from the map, where the animals were tagged and then dispersed primarily to the north, The average distance was about 15 miles, and the greatest distance was 53 miles. So from where they were captured and marked in the winter, they dispersed upwards of 53 miles from these actual capture locations. So deer move south generally from deep, high snowfall areas to more southern areas where they don't have to tolerate as much snow.
The other change you'll see in the maps across time is there was distinct polygons of wintering areas in Menominee, southern Menominee County and Dickinson County, and across time you'll see that disappear. Well, the deer didn't quit using that, it's just they're not concentrating like they were decades prior. So all of the low snow areas of Menominee County, southern Dickinson, Delta, and even part of Iron County, they seem to, and folks probably have noticed that, they're pretty much distributed throughout the landscape in winter. The winters just aren't typically as severe, and so that's the other type of winter range that we have here. We have areas in the north where they typically leave their summer range and go to a wintering area, and areas in the south where most of them don't move very far, kind of just move around to appropriate shelter because the winters are not as severe.
Early in the program, we knew it was important to involve field personnel from different divisions in the identification of the current deer wintering complexes. And we also thought it was important to involve the public, or give the public an opportunity to let us know where they're seeing concentrations of deer, to help us verify the locations of these deer wintering complexes.
We'll take all those observation information, that verification information this spring, and then we'll update the maps. We'll update that polygon to get a final GIS layer, final map that we can use in our management objectives. Those maps will then be used in management guidelines for timber sale specs that are most appropriate for in winter range areas. And on the verification, we're looking for input from the public. We're looking for as many wintering deer observations in the UP as we can get, and there is a observation form that folks can get on the website and fill that out and send it to us.
Don't miss the Woodtick Music Festival in Hermansville, Michigan. 4 days of great bluegrass, country, folk, blues, and rock and roll. Over 25 bands. Fun for the entire family. Carry-ins welcome. Kids 12 and under free. Buy your tickets and campsites and find out everything you need to know online at woodtickfestival.com. That's woodtickfestival.com. The Woodtick Music Festival in Hermansville, Michigan.
This segment started out to be about the art of chainsaw carving, and an art it is. Some people look at a log and see 2x4s, or a couple days of heat in the wood stove, while others can look at that same log and see a weary sailor who spent many a cold night on a lonely ship on a lonely sea. Yeah, this segment started out to be about that, but that changed over a cup of coffee and the story about how John and Marie jumped ship, burned their boats, and decided that they would get up every morning and do what they wanted to do, not what they were supposed to do.
I have spent a lifetime woodworking and building things. Generally, I got into the home building early on, and I had my own business. Did a lot of log cabin building, and I just got kind of wore out from it. Actually, a little bit tired. Maybe somebody would describe that as being burned out or whatever. And but nevertheless, I guess all I ever knew was wood. So our friend at the sawmill nearby had some chunks of log out back, and I guess I had met a chainsaw carver along the way through the years, and I always had that in the back of my mind that was really cool what he did, how he could take a chainsaw and make a sculpture. I just had to try that for myself. So we went one spring day and got a couple big log chunks and brought them to the house and put them out in the yard, and I fired up the old firewood cutting saw and dove into them, and it actually was very kind of exciting, and watching something come out of a piece of log, all it did was make me more interested in going and getting some more logs, and one thing led to another, and I found myself in the building business thinking about carving logs. But I guess I realized at that point that if I'm ever going to get good at it, I can't just do it on Saturday afternoons. I have to do it 7 days a week if I want to get good. I had met Marie along the way, And she was in the building business with me, and finding that employing people and having lots of projects going on at one time gets to be fairly stressful. And we just both decided that it was time to maybe get away from the stress. So Marie and I made the decision, and we called an auctioneer who came and got rid of it all in one day. And all we got left with was a few chainsaws, a few heads of staging, and a front end loader to move big logs. And so at that point, we dove full-fledged into chainsaw carving as a business and a lifestyle and a way of making a living. And I guess it goes back to the old story about the attack on, maybe it was the city of Rome or something, and the attackers were outnumbered 10 to 1, and one of the soldiers asked the general, how could we possibly win this, take this city? And he said, we start by burning our ships. There'll be no turning back, there'll be no ships to return. We go in and we take the city. And so Marie and I went into this with that same peace of mind. We're going into it full-fledged, do whatever it takes. So now this year, we are going on to our 4th year of chainsaw carving for a living, and we're paying our bills, and that's working out really well. Carving full-time certainly does make you a better carver, because you see the progression of carvings, and if you looked at the first bear I did, it looks nothing like the bears that we do now. So as we started carving and making a go of it, and Marie was doing my painting, then we got Marie excited after I bought her first Easy Start chainsaw. A woman coming into picking up a chainsaw who has never really chainsawed anything before, not firewood or especially a sculpture, to pick up a saw and be able to go at a log and turn it into something that looks lifelike and that has a personality, and it is just very exciting to watch.
Well, it's kind of funny because John started carving back in 2008, and he wanted me to get into it at that time. So he handed me a firewood chainsaw, and he had to start for me, of course. I can't start the big saws. And then he handed me a chunk of wood, and well, I tried it. My arms got tired within 5 minutes, and I didn't like the noise, I didn't like the smell. But when he started getting into his carvings, I said, okay, I'll help you, I'll paint your carvings, do the finishing, which to me is an important part of it. It brings the carvings to life. He came home with an Easy Start chainsaw that he had bought from a guy at one of these festivals, and it was Easy Start, I could do it. So I started carving with that saw, and then I wanted to get away from the normal things that people do, the bears and the eagles. I just thought I'd go a different route. So I'd try different creatures like frogs, turtles, otters. Gnomes was the first thing I think I wanted to try, because John would not carve a gnome, no matter how many times I asked him to. So my daughter had a little maquette of a little plastic gnome smoking a pipe, so I carved that, and he came out and he looked like a gnome, so I thought, well, this is cool. So that's mainly my thing, was to carve things other than bears and eagles. I haven't had any formal art training. I like to sketch now and then and come up with some ideas. I found that two-dimensional drawing is no relationship at all to a three-dimensional sculpture. It's a whole other ballgame, especially when you're talking subtractive art of carving wood away. You can't put something back once you've carved it out. So you better make sure how far that bar's going in there, and that you're not going to want some wood left over here for later on to add something. So I tend to carve away little bits at a time, more shaving it down to what I want, and that way I don't risk losing something that I might need later. It's not the quickest way to carve, not the most efficient, but it seems to work for me. And quite often my carvings will evolve as I'm working on them into something other than what I imagined at the beginning, and that's kind of the fun of it too. You're not sure what you're going to come out with. You have an idea, but sometimes a log has its own ideas. There might be some rot or something that you got to work around, and that changes everything. I was lucky in that I had a leg up with John already doing it and having the equipment that we needed and the expertise, and he could help guide me. He doesn't really guide me in terms of my ideas, because I have my own ideas, but when it comes to knowing what kind of saw to buy, how to sharpen it, he does all that stuff. The main thing is I'm doing something that I really, really enjoy, which is something that is very important. As you get older, you find out, well, I did a whole lot of other different things as I was in my working career. But I never had a job where I just woke up that morning and said, let's go. I got something I want to do today. So you never really have time to do what you want to do, you just do what you have to do. Now, finally, my kids are growing up. I have time to do what I want to do. I'm able to do what I want to do. I'm lucky in that way. We're not living paycheck to paycheck, we're living carving to carving, but we're living, and we're living well, and we're happy, and I think that's the main thing. I wouldn't recommend it for just anyone because of all that's involved, but what I would recommend is that you personally find out what it is you enjoy doing and just try it. And you don't necessarily have to make a living at it either. Just try something you haven't tried just to see how you like it. And if it works out for you, where you can make a living doing that, well, go for it, because then you'll be happy. I wouldn't want to have a job that I had to go to just because it paid well or I needed those health benefits. I'm going to force myself to work that job until I retire. I would hate that. I just couldn't see doing that, no matter how well it paid. To me, that being happy in what you're doing is the most important thing.
I do remember a story. It's a guy from Dickinson County, and his name is Roger, and Roger had the most beautiful carved fish, and it had a blue ribbon on it, and he took a first place in a world competition. And I said, that's just amazing, and how many years do you have to carve to be able to win a first place in a world competition? He had only been carving for 2 years. And so I asked, how did you actually get into wood carving? And he had to work an entire career and retire before he realized he had time to do something else. And what would it be? He bought a couple carving knives and got some wood and started carving just to stay busy. And as it turned out, he really was a wood carver all along. He just didn't realize until he picked up the knife and the piece of wood. And I would just wonder how many people might actually be a wonderful musician, a piano player or whatever, but don't really know until they take the first piano lesson or get the first piano brought in their home. So I just wonder, we all have hidden talents, and we'll never know unless we experiment a little bit with different things and find out that is actually what we were meant to do. So I encourage everybody, if you have just a whim to try something, try it, because you might really like it and it might turn into something more than you ever expected.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Monday night, right here on Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.